All right. So getting into the class, uh, it's the beginning of a new year. And I oftentimes in January do a group detox or some sort of a New Year's reset. I'm still going to do that myself. So if that's something that you want some help with, do reach out because I think it is great to do periodic resets or a periodic detox, depending on what you're working on in your health. For most people, doing something like that is really helpful. And I like to call it a reset too, because we all have life happen and we sort of get off of maybe the typical health strategies that you implement for yourself, and doing a reset where you really focus on it can kind of get those habits back into place. And they usually carry out after that for a while. So not to diminish um, the focus on that, but as I was getting to the end of 2020 and thinking about what I was hearing from everybody, and really feeling myself, I started thinking about burnout because I don't need to go into the reasons why so many people are feeling symptoms of burnout, but it's what clients, friends, family kept telling me. And I was even myself having trouble getting focused on what to do in the new year, and realized that I was experiencing some symptoms of burnout and just needing to kind of check out over the holidays. And normally I'm getting really excited about January, because it's a time a lot of people focus on their health, and I always enjoy it. And it felt a little bit different this year. So I decided to put together a month of information for you on burnout. And so this is a webinar kind of bringing together a bunch of the articles I've written and content I've been putting out on social media. If you follow that, then we'll kind of bring that together today and talk about what burnout is, what are the symptoms, the root causes, how do we know when we're burnt out, what is actually happening in the body that often can play into burnout, and then what can we do about it. I know a lot of you that are here. I don't know that I recognize everybody, but I know there's a lot of you here that have probably heard my story. But I always start classes by sharing a little bit more about myself. Um, the first bite of food my mom gave me when I was an infant sent me to the hospital. I started my life with food sensitivities and food allergies, and that just kind of snowballed as I got older. And I was always popping Benadryl and dealing with immune dysregulation. I didn't know that's what that was at the time. I just, knew that I reacted to foods. And it caused me to actually be somewhat fearful about food, which then developed into some disordered eating patterns over time. And so I really kind of dealt with some challenges around food with my mental health, and then also with the way my physical body was reacting to it. And I think the two are tied up and intertwined completely. So that's how I address those things now with clients. Um, and as I got older, I started to develop some more gut issues, bloating and nausea and things like that. And it kind of turned into, as I got a little bit older, into some anxiety. And it wasn't until I was in some of you know I was a musical theater performer for many years. That's what my undergrad degree was in. I did not know I would be doing wellness, and I love it. But I didn't really shift into that career until I started having kids. And I walked into an audition, and I remember this because I was starting to have this like rapid heartbeat thing that would happen to me when I got stressed. And we're going to talk today about what happens in the body when we're stressed and how we can complete the stress cycle. I had no idea about any of that at the time. And auditioning is obviously a stressful type of situation, but I had been used to it for years. And this was kind of a new thing, that I would have this like physical symptoms. So I would feel fine in my mind. I would feel like I was safe. I was going in to do something I love to do, but my body felt like it was running away from me. And I started having more difficulty, like shortness of breath and things like that, which made it hard to sing. And there's one moment that really kind of defined me turning a corner and figuring out what to do about all of that, which was walking into an audition that I'd spent like a year postcarding and working to get in front of this casting director. And I went in and I really bombed the audition, and walked out and cried my way home on the subway. And it was that night that I started searching around online for somebody who could help me. And I found a functional nutrition provider who said that there was a connection between the gut and the brain, and that our mood could be affected by our gut health. And it really spoke to me. She also talked about sugar addiction, and I always had a lot of trouble with sugar and carbohydrates, and if I ate them, I'd want 10 more. That was like the first sticking my toes in, and then over the course of years and years and years, it's evolved. And at that time, just by addressing my gut, I found like 50% improvement from all of those symptoms. So, gut health, every time I feel off, every time in this past year, I've felt overwhelmed. Um, I'll think about stress and how to complete the stress response. But I'll also think about what are the root causes in my body? What's going on with my gut? Because there could be something fueling this that's making it feel worse than it would be if that was resolved. And I want to introduce that early on today because it's kind of a theme of today, and is this idea of both addressing our mental emotional health and finding strategies in life, whether it's exercise or play or other types of things that help us work through the stress response, but also addressing our physical body, because there's stressors that can come from within that we may not know about. And that has been huge in my journey, is knowing how to address those. um, I should say knowing both, but knowing how to address those is something a lot of people don't realize. And so um, that can be easier to address while you're working on like life circumstances, because sometimes those things, and we all know this from this year, they're not so easy to change, right? So what can we change? What do we have control over? And that can really help us feel more in charge. Nobody wants to feel out of control, and there's a lot of things that we can take control of. So we'll get into that. My kind of add on to this journey and why I wrote here why 2020 was more manageable because of it, is because, those of you who know me and, know that my husband works in entertainment and that we have 3 little kids who've been at school and home. It has not been an easy year. It was very challenging. And I think I really was thanking my lucky stars that I had found somatic experiencing, which I'll tell you more about later. That is, those are methods for completing the stress response in the body. So I was feeling very grateful that I had the tools to know how to do that, because I think I would be far more dealing with a lot of burnout. That, like I mentioned, I was dealing with some symptoms, but I think I would have been feeling a lot worse if I hadn't had those skills. So I'm going to talk to you about those here in a little bit. And then also just knowing what to do with nutrition and lifestyle and supplements to work through having more stress in life. Because again, that stress may not be something that can shift quickly. We can work on it, but as we work on it, what else can we do that we have control over? So I want to share more of those things with you, because I really think that in my health journey, I could really see a difference this year with what was going on. Okay, what is burnout? I think most of you know that, but just to kind of cover that, it is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that's caused by excessive and prolonged stress. Some symptoms of burnout include difficulty waking up in the morning, afternoon fatigue. If you're relying on caffeine all day to get through the day, that can be a symptom. Craving sugar, salt, or fat on a regular basis. Knowing that you have some hormone imbalance, perhaps you've been diagnosed with something that is related to hormone imbalance, or you just feel like things are off, irregular cycles. There's a whole lot of stuff that can go under that hormone balance umbrella. Increased illness due to immune system depression. When we're really stressed, that can suppress our immune function. Acne and other skin problems, depression, definitely that feeling of lack of motivation, poor memory, having trouble focusing, feeling heavy and hard to get out of bed in the morning, just that fatigued feeling, or actually feeling, bigger symptoms of depression. We talked about hormone imbalance, but also PMS, menopausal symptoms, dizziness, feeling lightheaded. Here's one that some people don't realize. If you get a head rush when you stand up from sitting to standing, when our adrenal function isn't going well, and know that as I go through this, let me stop and clarify this. I will say HPA axis dysregulation. The HPA axis, that stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And we used to call it adrenal fatigue. And I will still use that term sometimes, but it's not a very accurate term anymore because we now understand that when we have this burnout kind of thing going on and it's affecting our hormones and our cortisol's dysregulated and all of these other symptoms under this adrenal fatigue umbrella, it's not that the adrenals aren't working. It's that the communication between these organs between these glands is not working well. And so, anyway, the official term is HPA axis. I'll sometimes say adrenal fatigue. I'm just using them interchangeably. Let's see, where did I leave off there? So yes, so rising from sitting to standing, if you get dizzy, blood pressure oftentimes can be running a little low if somebody is more in an adrenal fatigue state. So that's common, is that almost always when I see someone's hormone panel and their cortisol is like flatlined or really low, and they're reporting symptoms of fatigue and being tired all day, we will see low blood pressure. That's pretty common. When blood pressure is higher, oftentimes cortisol production is doing okay throughout the day. And stress can cause that too, but we might not be quite in that depressed cortisol state yet. So HPA axis dysregulation refers to multiple pictures that we would see on a stress index test. And I will show you one of those here in a little bit. Another one symptom can be irritability, bursts of anger, and inability to cope with the stress. Here are 3 common mistakes that people often make when they feel burnt out and they're trying to address it. One is working on solutions to the stressor, maybe being very successful in finding solutions to the stressors, but not addressing the stress in the body very well. Have any of you gone through a stressful period, had that resolve, whatever that stressor was or that period of time resolved, and then you got sick or you felt very exhausted for a while? That is your body now trying to resolve the stress, even though in your mind, you're like, why am I sick and tired now? It's over. So that's what's happening, is that we'll hit this burnout, and then we've got to figure out, how do I get my physical energy back, and work this through the body, because the body doesn't know it's over. The body doesn't know your taxes are done. Our nervous system doesn't understand those things, but there are some things that we can do to tell our body that the stress is over. And we're going to talk about that. The second thing is failing to identify root causes in the body and work on those to provide a more resilient body and mind. So that's what I was mentioning earlier, with maybe having some gut dysfunction or hormones out of balance, or maybe insulin is a little bit high. There's some insulin resistance. So if we look at what's happening in the body and we get that in order, it can make us far more resilient. We can handle a lot more in life. The third thing is feeling guilty. I see this in women a lot. Feeling guilty about taking a break from working, instead of just doing it. So I throw that in there because we all need to have fun and we need to take a break, and make time for that. And some of you may do that well. There are people, I will sometimes talk with clients and I'm like, that's awesome, you do that well. I'm not someone who's always done that well. And I also see that a lot. So I like to mention that. It's kind of like when we eat the chocolate cake, or we just binge watch shows for an afternoon and like blow off any work we had. Every once in a while, I mean, it's not good when it falls into that being all the time. But when we need to do that, there is actually a place for binge watching TV for an afternoon. It's like when you see in, a romantic comedy, and the breakup happens, and then you know, so and so gets together with friends and watches sad movies and cries and eats cake, right? There is actually things happening in that experience that tell the body that we're safe. So again, we'll circle back to that. So we don't need to feel guilty about that as long as it's just once in a while and we're also using some other healthy coping mechanisms to work through our stress. So root causes for burnout, different from symptoms. Our symptoms are what we might see or report when we are burnt out. The root causes are things that might be causing that burnout. The obvious one is stress and trauma. So that is one of them, and it's a big one. But there's all these other things as well. Food sensitivities. So anything that is causing a burden on the body or increasing inflammation, disrupting gut function, causing leaky gut, this is more stress for the body to deal with. If there's too many of these things going on, we might see that we get burnt out very easily, or we don't handle stress very well more quickly than somebody who has all of these things in order. So food sensitivities could be diet related and inflammatory. Diet that's going to be not getting enough antioxidants and nutrients in our food and getting more processed foods and refined sugar and carbohydrates. High levels of inflammation, which can come from a variety of places. If we just see high inflammation, usually and that would be seeing markers on labs like CRP that are high. Then we're going to want to dig for, why is that inflammation high? Is it diet? Is it stress? Is it food sensitivities? Is it gut infections and overgrowths? And just to kind of share, I had worked on my gut health, as I mentioned. I mean, that was over 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I circle back to it periodically. But when I get stressed and overworked or run down, my gut gets off. And then the fatigue is like, I don't know, 50 times, who knows how many times worse, but it feels significantly worse. And once I'll work on my gut again, and now I know what to do to kind of get things back going, get things back on track, that fatigue lifts. And then it's just, okay, now I can see the big picture and just deal with whatever was causing some overwhelm and stress to begin with. So it can be a vicious cycle for people. It usually is more than one thing, and one thing kind of triggers another root cause. Sluggish liver and detox pathways. Some people just have more genetic like SNPs and mutations that can affect detox pathways. If we know about those, then we can support those with the right nutrition or the right supplements. But that can definitely play a role. Micronutrient deficiencies, so low in certain vitamins or minerals. Poor sleep, if we're not getting good sleep or we don't have good sleep hygiene practices in place, that can certainly disrupt our circadian rhythm. Cortisol is, a big part of that. And there's a lot of other hormones and neurotransmitters that have their own circadian rhythm. And so if we're not getting good sleep, that could disrupt that. And then sympathetic dominance. And what I mean there is that we are in the stress side of our nervous system and kind of stuck there all the time. And again, that can happen for a number of reasons. Sometimes that's kind of a learned response. It can be that we're not completing the stress response during the day, and we just have gotten used to just kind of staying in this stuck sympathetic state. It can also be affected by these other things. If there's stress in the body, it's sending messages to our brain of inflammation or stress, and that can make our mood feel stressed out or cause our cortisol to be higher so that we feel like we're more in this stressy place. So as you can see, these all affect each other. And typically we'll see a handful of root causes together. And many times through working with clients, we'll be able to put our finger on the, kind of the mediators or the trigger, like what initially triggered the symptoms, and then what mediates it or what kind of causes it to come back, if that happens. How are we doing here? If you have questions, just taking a little break to mention this, post them in the chat box. If anything is unclear, I always have to stop myself a little bit from rambling. Just let me know and I can clarify. So stress and trauma. As I mentioned, this can, if we have these incompleted stress responses in the body, it can be very burdensome and affect our energy in a negative way. And it's almost like these like micro doses. If we think of it as a bucket, right? And we've got a bucket of how much we can handle in a day before our energy starts dropping. So how much can we throw in the bucket before it spills over and it's too much and it feels too heavy and our energy starts to like take a big hit and we feel fatigued? There's only so much. And if we get these like micro doses of stress that we don't finish, that's what can happen. So, you know, we want to survive. We are wired for survival. And so we will watch for things that might interfere with our survival. We will watch for threats. And if this kind of becomes this chronic, unfinished stress, that can lead to anxiety. So sometimes we'll describe anxiety as like, we had a stress response and we just kind of never finished and we stayed up here and now we're up here all the time. We can also describe it as kind of chronic fears that aren't really getting resolved. And that could be stress in the body that's unfinished, if that makes sense. So even though in our mind we feel like we've resolved them, our body hasn't resolved them. Life is inherently uncertain, but you know, that's like the big word of 2020 is the uncertainty. And you know, still now there's a lot of uncertainty and we don't really know when what's to come and how it's all going to play out. And that can be really stressful. So let's kind of go through exactly what is happening in the body when we see a threat. So our hypothalamus, this is why we call it the HPA axis. Our hypothalamus is going to see that threat, you know, get information that there's a threat. And there is a message sent to the pituitary and then to the adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands then release stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And one of three things is going to happen. We're going to fight, we're going to flee, or we're going to freeze. And that's like playing dead. That actually does, typically we consider freeze as an automatic response. It's something that happens when we actually get so high that we slip up, we like slip into our parasympathetic nervous system. And in a human, that would look like fainting or, you know, it's an automatic thing. It can also be not quite so unconscious in that there's literally just no other option. So we just tighten up and don't move. And so we're sort of conscious, but we're stuck in freeze. And some people kind of actually tend more towards freeze and live there. I always use my son as an example because it's obvious that, you know, when we're born, we're going to have some natural responses that we fall into. And my 6-year-old, he's more of a freezer. And sometimes that's very calming. Like he'll kind of space off, right? If there's too much going on and everybody's talking, he'll find these great coping mechanism ways of kind of just going inside and sort of zoning out. And so in that sense, he's in a very relaxed parasympathetic place. But if things are too stressful, he'll also sort of go there and you can tell it's kind of an activated, I'm not here, like don't talk to me kind of place. And so if you are that type, I'm a little more like that myself. You may resonate. If you're not, you may not really be sure what I'm talking about right now. But typically, you know, because when you get really activated or really stressed, you might feel the need to like go punch a wall, more of a fighter, or you're having a fight response. You might want to just go like put your head under a pillow and hide for the rest of the day. That can be a fleer. Or if you're a runner, sometimes runners like that's a really healthy way to work out that flee stress response. So we all may have a tendency, but of course we're all probably going to experience all of these responses depending on the situation. So when that happens, that's what we do. We run away, we fight, or we freeze. If we were an animal, we would just automatically do those things. And then we would go all the way through the stress response and come out of it, leaving not much trauma in the body. Of course, even in animals, that can't always happen. Um, so that can be the case. But in humans, we have this, prefrontal cortex and our ability to reason and think, and it's what makes us human, and it makes us able to do a lot of amazing things. But we oftentimes shut down the response. And that can also be a survival mechanism, right? If we're at work and our boss says something that we're really unhappy about, and he says it every day, but we can never respond the way we want, we are kind of shutting down that stress response. And that's important for survival, because if we, punched so and so in the face, we might lose our job, which we need for survival. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but if we're aware of the stress as it comes up, then we can find ways to either in the moment or later finish that stress so it doesn't cause health issues and reduce our energy over time. And just to clarify, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, when I say that, our sympathetic is that fight, flight part of our nervous system, and our parasympathetic is rest, what we call rest and digest. That's what we shift back into when we feel safe, secure, and settled. And so I think I went through that pretty well. So let me give you a case study on some of this. And then, actually, I forgot that I wanted to talk about this. There were some points on this slide. So as I mentioned, our nervous system doesn't know that, we resolved that argument with whoever we were fighting with. It doesn't know that after losing a job, we got a job, or that it's going to be okay because actually we realized something different with our finances and now things are fine. Our nervous system doesn't get it. Our brain gets it. Our prefrontal cortex gets it. So in order to complete the stress response in the body, we need to speak the language of the body. And so we need to complete the cycle. And I'm going to give you 6 or 7 ways that you can complete the cycle. Some of them you probably do already, just naturally, because you realize they make you feel better in life or they give you energy. So a big one is physical activity. This is one a lot of people do, is go sweat it out, right? And so that can be great, 20 to 60 minutes of physical activity. The way you know that that's working for you is that you have more energy the next day, you feel better, and it feels good while you're doing it. A little bit later, I'll return to a caveat on exercise, which is that if you are burnt out and it's not just emotional, there's like a lot going on with hormones and low cortisol in the body, then hard exercise is not usually a good idea. So I'm going to return to that. But if you do exercise and it feels good that day, it feels good the next day, it feels good the day after that, it seems to increase your energy, then go for it. And that can be anything. Running is an obvious physical response to stress if we're running away from it. So go on a jog. I just did a kickboxing class, and it was because the Zumba class was full. And I love dance, so I was kind of like bummed I couldn't go to Zumba, but I went to this kickboxing and like punching class, and I couldn't believe I found myself like really working out some anger, and it felt really good. So I just kind of dug inside to whatever needed to come out and punched it into that bag, and it felt really good. So any sort of physical activity that you find can help, but if you think about it in terms of that too, you may play around with some different exercise for completing a physical stress response. Breathing. Another great thing about exercise is that it makes us take long, deep breaths usually. You can also just do some breathing exercises. Take deep, slow breaths, especially when the exhalation is longer than the inhalation, because when we're stressed, we don't typically exhale fully. It's why a nice, good long sigh can feel really good. So even if deep breathing can be good too in the midst of stress, because it can help in the middle of the day to just siphon off some stress, even if we can't like fully complete it with, a good long time frame of physical activity. Positive social interaction. This has also been hard this year with a lot of the social distancing measures and working from home and things like that. And positive social interaction is one of the first external signs our body gets that the world is a happy place. So if you tend to keep to yourself, I might encourage you when you're at the grocery store to initiate some social interaction, like comment on someone's shirt or necklace. And you can even think of it, if you're more introverted, as sending a message to your body that the world's a safe place. So that kind of little bit of connection, there has been research that people with more acquaintances have more happiness and more fulfillment in life. It doesn't mean that they're spending lots of time with other people. You can, if you like to be on your own, that's great. And you can still have those little interactions, but, kind of finding ways to find those positive social interactions is one method of helping your body recover from stress. Laughter. And that can happen too with those social interactions. Sometimes it initiates a good laugh, especially the type of laughter that is like true deep belly laughs. So, even if that's like watching a funny, I don't know, like I love Saturday Night Live. So I would watch something like that, or some sort of really funny movie or show can be helpful. If anybody here watches, what is the Schitt's Creek, that was like my show I returned to last year, just to laugh hard. I think it's really funny, but we've all got our own humor that appeals to us. So pick something out that appeals to you and dig into that. Or just, even better, somebody who always makes you laugh. Touch base with them. Affection. Sometimes we're too far into our stress into a stress response to laugh. We're not in a place that we can do that. And so affection is the next thing that you could reach for if laughter isn't available to you. And so affection is deeper connection with a loved one. Someone who you like, respect, and trust, who likes, respects, and trusts you. Connecting with someone like that can go as far to telling your body that you've escaped a threat as running 2 miles. And so if you're not in the mood to exercise, laughter isn't available, finding someone that you like, trust, and respect, who feels the same about you, and connecting with them. And some ways to connect that have been studied to help settle the body into the parasympathetic nervous system. One is the 20-second hug. And so you hug someone for 20 seconds where you are both standing in your own, like you could hold yourself up. You're not falling on someone, but you're holding your own space. They're holding their own space, and you wrap your arms around each other and you hug for 20 seconds or until you feel it's finished. And usually if you've hugged someone that way, I'm sure most of you have, when it's done. This is another one with my 6-year-old. It's like his best way of resolving stress. We're working on some new ways because mom is not at school to do that. But at home, he'll climb into my lap and we hug. And then at some point I'll see him just get up and walk away. Stress resolved. We see that happen with kids a lot, right? They have something stressful happen. They fall and bump their head. They climb into a caregiver or a safe one's lap. They sit there until it's resolved and then they walk off. And we can do the same thing as adults. That 20-second hug has been shown to lower blood pressure and heart rate, change hormones, and improve mood. And it also teaches your body, like I said, that you're safe. But you want to feel the shift. Hug until you feel the shift and you feel relaxed. If you have a partner that you kiss, and this is from John Gottman. I use Gottman as many of you know, I'm finishing my master's in counseling. I'm actually done with classes and am interning at Resolve Counseling. And the Gottman therapy is what I will use with couples. And so Gottman has the 6-second kiss. And so a 6-second kiss is potentially long and awkward, right? For it's like a long, just stop and hold a kiss. But 6 seconds is too long to kiss someone you resent. And it's definitely too long to kiss someone that you don't respect, trust, or love. And so that again is sending a message to your body that the world is safe. So you can see there's these things that you can just do. And I think oftentimes, especially if you live with a partner, um, sometimes if life gets busy, you just forget to do those things or you don't take time for them. So I think it's important, even though some of it may seem like, oh, yeah, kisses and hugs. Of course, that would feel good. But we might not take the time to really let our body feel it and let that improve our hormones and our mood and our feeling of safety. Pets. If you live alone, but you have a pet, or you don't live alone and you have a pet, they are great too. We don't need a human to get the benefit from touch. So, petting or hugging a cat, laying down and rolling around with a dog, those will work too. Another one is the big cry. And here's the key with crying. So if you've had a lot of stress or had something happen and then, you have that experience of going off on your own where it's safe for you to just cry and you feel better, that's what I'm talking about. And if you're doing this in a focused way, don't think about what it is that made you cry as much as possible. Don't force that. But if you cannot focus on the thing, but just focus on crying and just cry until you're done crying, that will help your body complete the stress response too. And that circles back to the romantic comedy, right? Of sitting and crying. Like if you put on that movie and you're like, oh, I know this part always makes me cry. And you go through the story with the characters and you cry your heart out and, then it's over. That actually helps you complete the stress response too, because we're doing that with the characters in the movie. So just focus on how it feels and cry until you're done. Creative expression. That's one of my favorites. So this is the last one I'll mention, but creative expression can help complete the stress response. It has been found in research that doing this today, like if you do something creative today, it's going to increase energy, excitement, and enthusiasm tomorrow. And so if any of you have something creative you love to do, for me, it's singing or performing. And I will notice that I could start getting too much work and working really hard, but sleeping well and eating well and doing all the things, exercising. And then I have a night where I go sing somewhere and I might have a glass of wine and stay up too late. And I feel better the next day, feel better than I felt all week. Creative expression. That is what just helped complete stressors from the week. And it wasn't so much that I wasn't eating well or that I wasn't getting exercise. That's not what was causing some stress or fatigue. It was incomplete stress response. So that is something to keep in mind to play around with. All right. Okay, I'm going to give you a case study. I always do this usually in webinars. Lindsay was a client who was burnt out, lack of motivation, fatigue. She was noticing that her skin was less vibrant, aches and pains, kind of noticing like an occasional stomach ache. She's a mom of two, has age 3 and 7 kids, a full-time job, is currently working from home due to COVID, really low energy and wants it back. And so we ordered some labs. We got an adrenal stress test and hormones. We got the Dutch test, if you're aware of that one. It's a really great hormone panel. We got thyroid, iron panel, blood sugar markers, a comprehensive stool analysis to look into gut health, and then gluten and food sensitivity testing. And this is what an adrenal stress test looks like. It's part of it. There's more on it. This was part of the Dutch test. We also can get this test by itself without all the other hormone markers. And what's neat here is we get to see what cortisol looks like through a 24-hour period. And as you can see, it's kind of right in the middle of normal in the morning, but it just like drops down and is low, 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 low until barely getting into the normal range at nighttime. And so this is really what we would say is a classic picture of adrenal fatigue or low cortisol. We can see over here on these little dials that 24-hour free cortisol and metabolized cortisol is really low. DHEA is a precursor to our reproductive and stress hormones, and that is fine. So the building block is there, but for whatever reason, which I'll discuss, cortisol is really low. We also saw that there was low blood sugar in the morning, high CRP, which means high levels of inflammation, gluten, almond, and egg sensitivities were present. And then there were dysbiosis and SIBO markers, which dysbiosis is an imbalance of bacteria in the gut, and SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which was in the small intestine. And, like so many people this past year, she reported a lot of chronic stress over the last year. And to cope, she was exercising 2 times a week and take some time to watch funny shows. So we see a couple of the complete the stress response things I mentioned in there. So based on those, we put together a 6-week digestive protocol for the dysbiosis and the SIBO, the possible SIBO. We got going on a gluten-free Mediterranean diet with 3 meals per day. So if cortisol is really low like that, and we're seeing a lot of fatigue, we don't want to intermittent fast. We don't want to do low carb. We want to make sure we're getting some complex carbohydrates at meals, and we want to eat evenly through the day because her body's not going to handle skipping meals very well. It's just going to cause blood sugar to drop low and then feel lousy, and energy is going to be worse. So intermittent fasting and keto are really great strategies for a lot of things and for a lot of people. But if we're in the dirt with our hormones, we usually have to kind of consider some other dietary approaches. This is the hardest thing for a lot of people to do, but we got her mostly off of caffeine and switched her to just 1 green tea at breakfast. And of course, got those foods that she's sensitive to out of her diet. We got her going on an adrenal glandular. If cortisol is really low, we can use a glandular, and it has like trace amounts of cortisol in it. That can help with energy and help to start to get cortisol up a little bit over time. Eulithero, and I'm going to go through this kind of quick here, but I did write an article, and I will pull that up for you if you haven't seen it yet. Excuse me, my throat is dry from talking. I'm going to pull that up right now because I haven't emailed it out yet, and I'll put it in the chat box, but it is up on my blog, and I will be sending it out via email soon. But it is the second part to a 2-part series I wrote on burnout. So I'm posting that here, and you can read that. I put a whole lot more info on, it's not wanting to paste into the chat box. Let's see here. Let me try again. Try one more time. And if it doesn't work, then it is literally, if you go to wiredandtiredwomen.com, it's the first article because they post them, with the most recent one. Yeah, it's not pasting. Sorry about that, but it's how to recover from burnout part 2. And on there, I go into a whole lot of different adaptogenic herbs for adrenal support, for HPA axis support, and kind of discuss how they're a little bit different from each other so that you can pick out what is going to work the best for you. So for Lindsay, we used Eulithero, maca. Those were the 2 that we picked as far as adaptogenic herbs to support the HPA axis. We got some activated B vitamins in, CBD to help with some of the aches and pains and some anxiety to help with sleep. Magnesium also is a calming mineral, can help with sleep, and is really important for so many different functions in the body. So we got that going. And then we did 3 months of weekly somatic experiencing appointments so that she could learn tools to process and work through stress in the body. And somatic experiencing, I'll put this in the chat box if you want to read about it. Traumahealing.org is the website. And that is an approach that was put together to help resolve stress and trauma in the body. And it's more of a, if you've heard this phrase, a body up approach as opposed to more like cognitive. A lot of therapy is more talk therapy. With somatic experiencing, it feels like a nutrition coaching session or a counseling session where you're sitting and you're talking, but we're noticing what's happening in the body. So there's a lot of mindfulness to it and a lot of sorting out what that means and what needs to happen with it and how we can help resolve that. It was a really big piece in my healing over the years. And now I have gotten trained in it and continuing to get further trained in it and use it with clients. So we did that for a few months. And then we did, implemented some breath and mindfulness practice on a regular basis and got the right exercise going, which was mostly yoga and walks in nature, some gentle types of things. That was a little bit hard because if you like hard workouts, pulling back on that can be challenging for a lot of people who are used to doing that. But it's important to healing to not push too hard. So Lindsay reported a 40% increase in energy after 1 month on the new diet and the digestive protocol. And after the somatic experiencing sessions, she reported feeling a burden lift and increased energy after every session, which is one of the reasons I love doing it, because I have had a lot of clients say this. They have said, I've done therapy in the past, but I've never done like this sort of work. And it is, and by the way, I should say that the reason I started doing that before finishing entirely at school is that yoga teachers can utilize it. And I'm a yoga teacher. And so I started using it kind of with like private yoga sessions and then started implementing it into nutrition coaching. And so if we're focusing on like relationship to food and some of these other and stress and things like that, I've just found it to be really helpful with people. And that is one thing I've loved hearing is how good people feel afterwards, that usually it feels good, just good, right? That's what we want. It doesn't feel heavy and hard to do. It can, but usually we feel better. Tips for burnout recovery. So we'll go through this before we wrap up for today. I always just like to share a case study in case you're interested in working with a functional nutrition provider or doing some coaching to work on stress or nutrition. That's kind of what it looks like if we're doing functional nutrition. And then I have some people who come in more for coaching type of work. Okay, I want to leave you today with some tips. So if you are feeling the burnout from 2020, make sure to add protein at each meal and snack and stick to whole foods. I know the whole foods thing is kind of obvious. If you're having trouble doing that, that's where I think some coaching work can be really helpful, because sometimes we know what to do, but we're just not doing it. Protein is important if we are dealing with some adrenal fatigue. Blood sugar is usually not as stable. And so protein at each meal or snack can help stabilize that. So that's just a good first step. If you do one thing with food, is just like get some protein in at your meals and snacks. Include complex carbohydrates and lots of veggies at meals. Again, if you're feeling really, really low energy throughout the day and you're not eating many carbohydrates, I would add some in and see if it helps. One way to do this, because I do myself feel pretty good on a lower carb diet, but if I get too low and there's too much going on in life, it starts to not serve me. And so what I will do is add some complex carbohydrates in at dinner time, and then maybe some berries or some something that's not real high in carbs and it has a lot of fiber, like some fruit, like apple, at lunchtime. And kind of that can fit better in the circadian rhythm than eating carbs earlier in the day, which is kind of counter to what a lot of people think about carbohydrates. So that's one way to try that if you're on a lower carb approach. Go easy on caffeine, limit or avoid it, or you can try the The one I use in my office is Organo Coffee, which has reishi mushroom in it. It's kind of more of a dosed amount of coffee, so you're not getting as much caffeine as typically people drink in their coffee, and you're also getting an adaptogenic mushroom that can help with your response to the caffeine and also support the HPA axis. So that's kind of like a in the middle option. If you're really in the dirt, probably want to pull off caffeine for a while and really try to stick to herbal teas or maybe some green tea. Include adaptogenic herbs and mushrooms like ashwagandha or rhodiola. Like I said, refer to that article I wrote on Burnout Part 2 for more info there. Get at least 8 hours of sleep per night and maybe even more. I remember when I was in a state of burnout, my functional medicine provider said, is there any way you can sleep an extra hour a night? So see if you can get more sleep than you might typically. Also get regular exercise, get enough, but again, don't overdo it. So don't push too hard. If you notice that you work out, it feels good after maybe, but the next day you're like totally fried, then it may be too much. Sometimes we get that feedback the next day. So just kind of pay attention to your energy on a day-to-day basis and make sure that your exercise is not what's making it lower. Try the 4-7-8 breath daily for a few minutes. And this is an inhale for 4, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. And you do that for 3 minutes. And that breath has been studied to help the body shift into the parasympathetic nervous system. Only takes 3 minutes. I've found that even a minute of doing that can really help me relax. So do what you can, but if you can do that for 3 minutes, that's a great intervention. Include downtime and mindfulness practice, and honor your emotions. So in the society we live in, we are not really taught very well to do this. And so I'm going to use an example with kids because I always think it's like easy for adults to picture this with kids. But when one of my kids runs up to me and they say, so-and-so punched me or so-and-so did this, the first thing I say is, yeah, I can see you seem really, that sounds upsetting. You look frustrated or you look sad. Is that what's happening? And they'll say, yeah. And then we have the hug. We complete the stress response. Then if I need to go deal with the other kid, maybe I will. Or maybe it's just, something where there was some tattletaling and we all resolved our emotions and we're moving on. So we can do this as adults, right? A lot of times we just go to fixing the problem. So take a minute to honor how you feel about it and let that be okay. Yeah, I'm really mad and I'm just mad. Now I'm going to figure out what to do about completing that stress response and maybe finding the solution, et cetera, et cetera. But remember not to skip that step. All right. Thinking if I had anything else to share on the information for today. I hope this gives you some ideas and some tips to get going on. I also want to share with you that for the month of January, I'm doing a special New Year's Burnout Recovery Package. So whether this could help you or if it can help someone else, feel free to share this recording with them and let them know about it. I know a couple of you I've actually worked with, so this may be something that you can share with some people that are dealing with some burnout or would like a functional nutrition approach to dealing with any health issues they have. So it includes a Dutch adrenal stress index lab test. And on that test, what we look at is that lab I showed you. So we'll look at cortisol levels and circadian rhythm over a 24-hour period. We'll get to see what the total cortisol and free cortisol and metabolized cortisol looks like. We'll see what DHEA looks like. If DHEA is really low, that's actually something we can supplement with. I don't supplement it. I don't usually recommend it, even though it is over the counter, unless I know that someone is low in it. So that will tell us that. DHEA has also been shown to help with like autoimmunity and a whole bunch of other things that someone can be dealing with besides just burnout and low energy. So it's a good thing to know what your DHEA levels are. And then It includes the new client case review and lab review appointment. So we will get the lab ahead of time. Usually I don't get labs until we meet the first time, but in this case, we'll go ahead and get the lab and then we'll meet. Before we meet, I'll do a whole case review of the intake of your intake paperwork. Then we'll meet, go over the labs, go over that. I'll lay out a food and supplement and lifestyle plan. And those of you who have worked with me know that I kind of like this to be a dream experience. I definitely like this to be a dream experience because mine was not so smooth. So I lay out really detailed plans for people and I have a portal and it's all in there for you. And we can message back and forth and make sure that you feel supported in implementing any changes. And then it also includes a somatic experiencing 1 hour session in which we will work on stress. And if that isn't so much what you want, we can also use that as a nutrition coaching session. So that can be used however you see fit. And of course, follow-up questions. If you want to take a look at that, I discounted it. You save $200 if you register for that by the end of January, but you don't need to use it until you're ready. So it's good for like ongoing. If you want to use it 6 months from now, that is fine. But the savings is only good until the end of January. You can book it at this link, bit, I'll put it in the chat box too, bit.ly/burnout recovery package. So check that out. On the flip side, if you're just interested in somatic experiencing or you're interested in just doing a new client case review, reach out to me, let me know. I always do a 30-minute complimentary appointment for new clients. My office is at 80th and State Line in Prairie Village, or we can do it via phone or Zoom. So I hope this info that you got today helps you get going on the year. If there's anything that I can put out as far as future webinars or articles that you might find helpful, please let me know. I'm always kind of like thinking through what the next thing is I should write about or and help you with. So let me know. It's a pleasure to see all your names here. I hope you're all doing well and Happy New Year. Reach out if I can do anything for you going forward. That resolves our class. Oh, and this is my Instagram link. If you're not on Instagram with me, I post stuff every week. So feel free to follow me there for that info. All right, any questions? This wraps up the class, but if you want, I'll stay here for a few minutes if you have any questions. So feel free to post those. And otherwise, Happy New Year, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.